The earned value method is a method of reporting project status by comparing earned value, what we have actually accomplished in a project, to planned value, what we had planned to accomplish during the same time period in the project, and also looking at the actual cost of what it was we have executed, of the work we performed. Earned value is a wonderful way to keep track of project status, but it doesn't come without problems. It can, at times, be misunderstood by both project managers and by sponsors, stakeholders, the folks who are either funding or working with the project. Let's look at an example of where only using earned value can misstate the actual execution. Let's look at some project data. So here's our project. We have what appears to be 3, 6, 9, 12 10 activities and 2 milestones, M being a milestone and the end being a milestone. So as we use this data, we want to first define the critical path using our predecessors and our duration. And the critical path then is those activities which have zero float. In other words, any activities which, if it is delayed, delays the project end date, that activity is on the critical path. So let's examine then our critical path in this project. So our first 3 tasks are A, B, and C. They begin on the start. They are 2 periods, 4 periods, and 3 periods long. So if we look at or plot those activities against our project schedule here, we have A, 2 periods in length, B, 4 periods in length, and C, 4 periods in length. Now, D is the next activity, which is dependent upon the completion of both A and B. It's a finish start to relationship. When A and B both finish, D may start. So as we extend our project schedule a little bit, here's where D sits. Okay? X, M, or rather the M here, is a milestone. It has 0 effort associated with it. It completes in this week where the work on activity D is finally completed. Why do we need that milestone? It's useful to be able to compare the planned and the actual completion date of milestones as we go through a lengthy project. With this project with only 10 activities, it's really not that important. But if we have hundreds of activities, milestones is a really useful way to break up the project, decompose it into digestible bites of work effort that we can easily understand. Okay, our next activity is E, a period in length, begins dependent upon M. Okay, so here's our E. F is dependent on E and H. H here is also dependent on M. That's 2 periods in long. So let's start by first defining E and M, and now we can define when F starts. So F starts here as a result of E and H, and I and J are able to begin on the completion or finish the start relationship with H, I, and J. And the last activity is G, which is dependent upon F and I. So if we extend our project across, we now have all of our activities identified with our final milestone, the end, occurring, and the end of that 16th work period, or that Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, of period 16. So the big question now is, which of these above activities have zero float? If we look at A, I've got 2 periods of float because although D is dependent upon A and B completing, B appears to be the critical path activity, so I got 2 periods of float. I can start this in period 2 or I can start it in period 3 without impacting the beginning of activity D. Similarly, I can start activity C in either period 1 or in period 2 without impacting the start of D. Now, as we go a little bit further down here, I see that E is 1 period in length. So my critical path is going to be between F, H, or F, I, and J. So that means I have 1 period of float here on activity E. I can begin it in period 8 or I can begin it in period 9. As I look at my final activity G, I have a period of float here on F and a period of float here also on J. But if we look at H, what's dependent on H, I, and J? Well, I'm not sure I have any float on H because if A is delayed, that delays I, and G is dependent upon the on-time completion of I. So what is our critical path then? Here's our critical path. 2 periods of float, 4 periods of float on task C, because activity C is not really dependent on anything. 0 periods of float on B, 0 periods of float on D, 0 float on H, 0 float on I, 0 float on G. So now I have my critical path identified. Everything that's in dark blue is critical path. If any one of these tasks is delayed, the overall project end date is delayed. Okay? So now I can do my earned value reporting against my critical path, because these are the tasks I really need to keep my eye on as a project manager. Now, it's possible if any of these non-critical tasks are delayed, if, say, activity A is delayed 3 periods and completes here, well, now that is critical path. So I'm not saying we ignore non-critical path activities, but we really have a very close eye on our critical path activities. Now, let's look at a scenario. It's week 8 here. And in week 8, here's my critical path. I now have actual cost or actual effort against my schedule. So, activity A, I've spent $4,000 and it's completed on time. Perfect. Activity B, which was projected budgeted cost of work scheduled, was $8,000. The actual cost is $10,000. So I'm complete, but I'm $2,000 over. Period or activity C is completed on time, on budget. Activity D completed on time, on budget. E is completed now. And E has been completed, we're under budget. And we expect that. We expect the variance to be plus or minus each week, but over the long haul of the project, we expect variances to smooth out. Otherwise, we could be over budget or we could be behind on schedule. Now, look at this. F has been started, so we've got $1,000 booked against F. So that's been started earlier. So how's the project doing? Well, if we were to look at our critical path items, our planned value is $28,000. Why? Because A, B, C, D, and E are all completed. as well as half of H. That's our plan. That was our plan, was to have half of H completed at this point in time. In actuality, if we look at earned value, A, B, C, D, and E are completed, but only half of F is completed. So we're still at $20,000. So our planned value and our earned value is the same. Our cost variance is 0. And if we look at the schedule variance, we are at 0. And here's the calculations over here to the right. And the actual cost is $28,000 because we booked A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay? So cost variance, schedule variance is 0. We must be doing great, right? Raise your hands if you all think we're doing great in the project. We actually aren't, because we're really not doing as well as the EVM indicators suggest. H on the critical path is not started, and B has a cost overrun, right? If we go up just a hair here, B is $2,000 over. But in spite of the planned value, earned value, and actual cost all being equal, the project is behind and over budget. So EVM is one perspective on project health, but without comparing the actual and planned start and finish dates, another equally important perspective, we're only getting a one-sided view of project efficiency, and that project efficiency is misstating both cost and schedule. Our critical path is behind, so the project is going to be late. This activity is not started. That means we are at least one period behind. We're going to be one period late. And even though we're under on task E, we have not yet completed F. Okay? I hope this has been instructive for you and has helped you understand earned value method a little bit better. It is still a valid way for tracking project status, but it should not be the only way we track project status.